Hello everyone and welcome back. First of all, I want to thank everyone for your engagement on my social media polls regarding what tutorials I should be creating next. And this we do today is one of the most polled ones. So we will be looking into Houdini Solaris and we're looking into lighting workflows like a MultiShot template. I will walk you through all the steps that I use to create a shot switcher to easily do overrides on a per shot basis, do maybe a sequence light rig, and specific options if you need to. So I think this will be quite helpful for everyone getting started into lighting in a more project orientated workflow. The scene files will be available on my Patreon. You can get access to the single scene file for this single tutorial, or you can subscribe to be a member of my Patreon, or even here on the YouTube channel to get access to all my previously uploaded videos. Also, feel free to comment below any tutorial suggestions that you want me to cover in any future videos. And now, let's dive into Houdini Solaris and MultiShot. Alright, so now let's get going. As you can see, we do have this nice, beautiful room here lit by night. And then I have a little bit of transitions going from sunlight to a night lighting. And then I have different cameras. And yeah, you might be wondering where I have gotten this cool asset from. And it's actually a file from JCube, which you also get directly in the scene file. So it will be part of the scene files, but obviously you can also download them yourself on jcube.jp solutions. There's like a big USD collection, and I found this Asper room, which has already some textures on it. And it's actually pretty cool asset, similar to the A-Lab scene from Animal Logic, I think it is. You've got the Moana USD files and all of that. So this is another one that can be used for educational purposes. Yeah, so as I said, I've got a couple of these scenes. I just played with lighting to get some interesting look. There's not much in terms of shading going on in this tutorial. It's just using the base colors, and then I just applied a simple shader to it. All right, and this here is my Houdini file. I try to be as clean as possible, so everything is clear what is going on. And yeah, in this video, I want to go over a multi-shot workflow, which is kind of using the new features of Solaris, using the cloning systems, and also using all the context variables to do like sequence lighting, which is up here, to do shot lighting, where you can do per shot overrides. And then this is essentially at the bottom is how I did the renders, also directly with the comp included. So similar as my previous tutorials, this follows a very similar workflow, but I'll be just going a little bit in more depth on how to create all of this. And a little bit is specific to this Asper room scene, because in a full production environment, you would not have one USD file with different render cameras and camera names. You can see it's probably a little bit small to read, but in the camera shapes here, you have these different camera locations. And I would say in a production environment, you would just have a shot, which is called render camera or main camera or something like that, which is just stored under the same location for each shot, and it would just pull that in maybe from a match move department or even layout potentially. But in this case, in this Asper room example, everything lives in one USD file. And I'm doing a couple of cleanup steps to get everything organized here. But maybe a quick fly through the scene just to show you what we are dealing with. Why can't I go in here? There we go. So we've got this little bedroom. And then from the bedroom, we are looking onto this kitchen little table where a couple of cameras, and then there's this little bathroom scene. If we go into the cameras, you can see this is all the different cameras. And then I'm just transforming the scene to be 0.1 smaller, so it's more like a real scale scene size. I think it's 10 meters, 6 or 7 or something. And then I'm using the Stage Manager to remove a couple of things, especially the lights. I didn't want to use the lights that come with it, so I'm just using the Stage Manager, opening it up, and then just deleting the location here. And then I'm using a simple base shader, which is just, again, this quick material that you get in 20.5. And I'm just using the display color as my base color, which means that every primitive has a display color primitive. I'm just reading this prim var as my base color. And then I'm assigning this essentially a strong material binding to the top groups. And if I open up the props, you can see once I'm here that the base shader is assigned to pretty much everything in the scene. And that was my main intention. So for this, it took me a little bit of a back and forth to get this working as I intend to. First, let's open up the context options editor. And this guy, the context options editor, allows me to create my custom shots or lighting environments. You can see I've got a couple lighting environments in here, and these are my render cameras essentially. And the initial setup was I'm creating an added camera and I'm targeting each camera specifically. So I would go into the spreadsheet here in a scene graph and I would essentially edit each of those. And then let's say I'm hopping into this camera now. Let's see, this is the bonsai shape. And if I render from here, the first thing I would do is to maybe place the focal length, right? So place the f-stop and the focal distance, and you can quite easily do that by hitting enter to enable the manipulator for the camera, and then you just shift click, and then you can kind of play with the focal points here. If you hit shift F as usual, you can visualize the focal plane. I'm not sure why it's behaving a little bit peculiar now, but either way, you can place the focal point like this, and then you can adjust the f-stop if you want to. And that I did essentially for every camera here. I played lens, and then I also just did a little bit of an animation, so that's just translating very subtly from left to right or maybe a pan in. So it's very simple translations here. Let's go back to 72, I think was my range. You can see now there's like a subtle pan, and that just happens on the render camera. And now comes the interesting thing. So what I did here, I created a render settings node. Usually everything is kind of enabled, and these are the default settings overriding everything. And this caught me off guard a little. So what I did then to figure it out, I went here and in the initialize parameters option, I set all parameters to do nothing. So everything is essentially a no op, essentially nothing is happening. And the only thing that I changed or enabled was the render camera. And this internally sets a render variable, which kind of sets the default render cam. And this allowed me to then use the shot switcher to always jump to the render camera. And you will see what I mean by that right now. So in this switch here, you can see at the top, there's now this render settings camera. And you can see it's a little bit of a different arrow here in front of this. And this is now driven by this variable that we just set essentially. So if I would go to my context options, I can now switch to shots, and you can see that the cameras are toggling. And yeah, you might be wondering how did you do all of this, right? So the first step is to create your own context option. So you would go to plus in the top left here, and there's lots of things to choose from. I just created a string menu, and let's just rename this to training shot. That's now my new variable. You can see the label is this, and the variable is there. And then these are the first and like default items. You can then go to edit, and then you have different options. So these are the values ABC, and the name is whatever you want to do. So you can do shot A, value A, shot B, value B, something like that. And in my case, in my shot one, I used numbers. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And because I'm driving it with a switch, let's just do actually the same, 0 and 1. And if I close the edit pane, so this is now my first item. Didn't we just A, B, there we go. Now I've got my two shots, and the values are 0 and 1. So now I can just easily create a new switch. And let's say I'm hooking up this one and this one, two different input streams. And then you can change the type by name, by pattern matching, or by index. And if you do index, you can now just read the variable we just created, the context option, training shot. Let's see what this results to. If we now change it to B, nothing happens in this case. Let's see if this should have, what does it say? Training shot is not found. Did I do a typo? Training shot, let's double check this. It's a lowercase s. So now it should work. So let's go again. Now you can see it's switching, and AB, you can see now it's switching between these two shots. And this is essentially how I did also the environment as well. So let me see if I can delete this guy. And environment, similar thing. I just 0, 1, and 2. These are different light rigs. And this is now the first instance. And as I said before, in a proper pipeline, in a production environment, you would not do this thing. You would just use a sublayer. And then you would pull in, let's say, I don't know, data as the drive, and then you would go show, shot, and then somewhere in shot would maybe be camera, and then would you just pull in the render cam or whatever, render camera.usd, and then the shot would essentially be a variable. So add shot, add show. This would probably be your structure, right? So whenever the shot changes based on your context variable at the shot here, then it will just pull in the right camera, and it will not, you won't need to do all the switching. What I could have done for this tutorial, I could have written out each of these cameras into a USD file and then did it exactly like that. But what I wanted to do is for you guys to follow along exactly the same way, just by loading in this main USD file, and then this should just work, and you can see exactly how everything went down. Then the next thought process is kind of the lighting environment, which is sequence lighting and shot lighting. And typically there's always a master light rig. Say it's an outdoor time, then we have this physical sky and a texture-based dome light, and a night, like another texture-based dome light, plus additional interior lights to make the scene look pretty. This would be my sequence master lights, and they are switched the same way based on this context environment variable. So if I look down here and I render now this, let's go actually to the bedroom. So I can just switch to the bedroom camera. I can just start XPU. This is now the physical sky camera and scene. At the moment, I have very basic render settings. Actually, I think it doesn't even grab anything because I didn't set anything. So my diffuse limit is, I think, on 8, so we'll get way more bounces, stuff like that. You can already see it's a lot more brighter. And then if you have obviously the denoiser, this is kind of that environment. And then there's this night environment where I have these additional lights created. And then we are just jumping to a different light source. And this is how you can see how it's kind of working. And I feel this is pretty neat. There you go. I think it was saving in the background. And then we also have the HDRI afternoon, which is a little bit different. But this is kind of the idea. There you go. And this is how I'm kind of setting things up. It's pretty straightforward, I feel. And then the next step is the per shot override. So let's say, for instance, we want to look at the bonsai camera. We go back. It's essentially another shot switcher in the lighting area, which just reads the same shot variable. So if we go to shot bonsai, let's see here. And then I'm not sure why this didn't change. There we go. This needs to be also the default render settings. And what I did for, let's say, this angle, I just added a rotation on the little fan just to show you what you can do on a per shot basis as well. Yeah, so for the bonsai shot, you can do specific things just in this data stream. And a cool thing, which is nice in Houdini as well, you can use the dim unused nodes, and then you can see which nodes are actually driven and active by my context switches. And then if we would go to the bedroom, you can see that the next stream is activated. There you go. Yeah, I just disabled the shading because it's just not really showing nicely in the viewer for some reason. And then here at the bottom are my render output settings. And these are just, you can see the final render resolution is 4K, 128 path trace samples. I increased the limits to have 5 bounces, image outputs, a couple of render variables. And then what else did I do? I think that's pretty much it for my render settings. And now what we can do, we can look into the clone rendering, which I feel is always really nice. So there's a new dialog as well. If you go to Solaris clone control panel. And you will notice that I do have already a couple of things set up. You can see I've got my shot names, variables 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. What I don't have is the right node. So the render node should be the live render section. So this guy. If you connect that up for everything, then you should be able to render. And a cool thing, if you want to test your scene essentially in different camera angles at the same time, you can kind of use this one. And Auto will use the render settings camera. One thing you probably do want to do is render, because it's based off your render settings, which are now 4K. We probably want to reduce this down to probably a quarter, or even, 10% is probably also good. 10% would be probably too small. Let's go a quarter. That should be fine. So a quarter, and then if we launch the clone, this will then show all of our renders pretty nicely. So all you got to do now, obviously clone, you go to clones, and then you create a new clone, like a local clone, and then you kind of fill in all this stuff. It's pretty straightforward. You can select all of them, and then you just say connect. This will launch Houdini sessions. Once it's done, it will launch the start the renders. All right, you can now see that stuff is starting to render. And what you can do, you can right click an image and you can say show in render gallery. This now loads up all my little clones. You can see it's quite noisy because I reduced the path trace samples. But what you can do as well, you can go to image filters and apply the denoiser. These will kind of recook, and you can now see that all of these are now rendering and they have the denoiser enabled. Let's get rid of this guy. Now let's say we want to change the light rig, right? I don't have the environment light rig as a variable for the clones, which means that I think that this variable will still apply. Let's see if it does. HDRI afternoon. And you can see by changing the environment here, all the clones do get updated. It's a little bit slow because we do actually render almost 1K resolution. I think it's probably better to reduce that. But as you can see, you can very quickly jump between your environments. And if you need to do a change that is maybe just part of one of the rooms or whatever, we can go to Bonsai room, which is this one here. And if I disable the rotation, it should now just re-render the bonsai. You can see that already changed it and it's already back with us. And we can disable the light that we have in here. You can see now that that will get disabled and it only updates where Houdini or Karma detects a pending update. So it's very nice to be able to light like this. And I feel very refreshing to be able to work live in several different environments essentially. So now I'm changing the light to be more bluish, more cool, or we can change the color to be maybe something like pink or purple. So it's pretty straightforward to do. And if you want to work now in the wide shot, you can see that the pink light is not affecting the room because this is actually in a different shot, which is in the bedroom where we don't have that pink light. But imagine you do want to have that same effect. You can just copy it over into the bedroom stream. And now the bathroom should also have the pink light. There you go. Now it's coming in. And now you do have that pink light here as well. So this is kind of showing you how to do all of that. And you can also control the clones right from here. So you can disconnect them if you don't want to render them again. You can snapshot them or you revert your shading, your network based on the snapshot. So it's pretty sophisticated. So now I just disconnected all the clones. So our render should now stop. And I can probably close this guy. So now you would see that the clone panel, everything is hopefully disconnecting soon. If not, we're just closing them down like this. Interesting that it did not close all of them, just the one. And now everything is disconnected. And now we want to go to let's go bonsai, and we want to go night. Now, if I render this again, XPU, let's go re-render from here. Oh, we've got the pink light now, which is fine. And you can already see it's compiling. Now it's done compiling the GPU and now it's rendering. And you notice that it's already doing the denoiser. And in this case, I do not want to have the denoiser on. So let me just make a couple of adjustments here. We go to the render settings. I know we have very low render samples at the moment, but I will just disable the denoiser, so no denoising. And you can see the noise is not too bad once it's fully resolved. Our render resolution is 4K in this display. So what I want to do here, I want to go to my display options, and I want to disable or change the render resolution to be viewport size dependent. So now it should be a lot quicker because we are just rendering the viewport size. And then we have now the option to enable the comp. Let's see, actually, what did I do here? Viewer comp, why is this not triggering? Okay, there you go. And this is now my comp that I'm using to actually render things out to disk. At the moment, this is denoising it within the comp, but not in this one. Let's see where it is. So here's the actual comp. So what I'm doing here, let me now get the render quickly in here. So pretty simple things. I just have my slap cop coming in here, and then you'll notice that I'm using this denoise AI node, which is also within cops, and all it's actually expecting is a RGB image, normal, albedo, motion vector. And by default, the color plane is RGBA. So I'm just choosing RGBA to RGB, which extracts me just the RGB component that I'm feeding into the denoise AI. And then if I look at my block begin node, I also have albedo and normal depth, which is blank for some weird reason, and motion vector, which is also blank for the moment. And then I'm just denoising it here instead of using the render setting denoiser. And then it's pretty straightforward as well. I'm just doing a little bit of hue and saturation, adding a little bit of glow, which is, I guess, not too strong in this shot. It's more strong in the sunlight ones. But yeah, you can apply, obviously, the glows. And then I'm using a blur node to blur the outside edges. You can see this is outside the lens, essentially. It's a bit more blurry. Then I'm using chromatic aberration to break up the lenses a little bit. And then I'm using the block end to just register this as a slap comp. And then technically you could also apply this right here. And then this will be enabled in here as well. So that is very basic comp stuff. And then at the bottom here, you might be wondering, how did I render this? It took me a little bit of time to sort this out and figure this out, but each USD render ROP at the very bottom, let me actually create a new one, USD render ROP. At the very bottom of, I think, the output section is these context options. And for each render ROP, I have different options. So Bonsai ROP uses environment 0, shot 0. Bedroom uses environment 0, shot 1, and so on and so on. What I'm doing as well, I'm using this option value for each of the variables, and I'm driving my output name, my output path by it. So you can now see I have this version 2 and then 2.0, which means shot 2, environment 0. If I would change my environment to, let's say, 2, this would be now outputting 2.2. And that way I was able to render everything without any confusion. And then the same output path, they are then kind of linked to this file path where I just extracted or created a new string variable on top level, which then in turn dive into the comps, bring in the rendered file, and then also outputs the final JPEG that is already the comp is being applied to that. So that is kind of the logic. And then I tried using tops to get everything rendering, but in 20.5, the deadline top scheduler behaves differently and it creates a job per work item, which is not desired in my case. So I went back to the submitter approach, and you can see I have my fetch, which pulls in the USD render. Dependent on this render, there's this bonsai comp ROP. So it will first render this task, then it will render this task. First this, then this, first this, then this. Then I'm feeding this into deadline, and then this will just render on the farm. I'm trying to set up HQ as well, which is Houdini's native task scheduler. Still having a little bit of issues with that, but this is kind of the overall look. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions. You obviously get all the scene files on my Patreon by subscribing to the Diamond Platinum tier. You will be able to get access to all my previous tutorials, or you can look into my Patreon shop, which is now similar as Gumroad, where you can get one-off payments for these scene files. As always, I do really appreciate your support, and see you in the next one. Alright, thanks everyone. I hope you did enjoy the MultiShot series. I was using this USD Asper Room file to show you different lighting camera angles, different lighting, daylight, nighttime. I think it was quite helpful to see, or to show at least, the flexibility of these templates. And yeah, so if you want to follow along, my scene files are on Patreon. And if you have any other ideas for tutorials, please let me know in the comment section below. And I'll be looking forward for the next one, seeing you on there. See ya.